some things that were obvious, some things perhaps not so obvious. But in any instance, it really, it's a great filter through which to look at our stories, to look at our characters in a big, big way. Identity. If I said, let's talk about an identity movie, what would be an identity movie?
The Bourne franchise.
Big time. Why?
Because it starts off where he doesn't remember who he is,
Yes.
and then like all these things start getting unfolded.
Why is that effective?
I think it's the fantasy element of it. Like for me, like I love that because it's like, wait, what if I've had a previous life that I didn't know about?
Okay, so we kind of like that. But that goes back to something, but I'm not going to go there yet. Okay? But that feeds back into something that's very basic with a lot of humans. How about another one? Can we get another one?
With the Parent Trap people?
Yeah, because they switch identities, right? The twins.
It's like they never even knew that they were sisters.
Right, yeah.
And then they switch.
And that is actually going back into both of these films, incidentally, kind of go back into its old paradigm, to an old, that's biblical almost. How about something else?
Do any superhero movies match that?
Only all of them, for the most part. Well, but sometimes for different reasons. Sometimes that identity is something that must be maintained secret, and so it becomes an Achilles heel. Sometimes if they know your identity, you can go to the loved ones and attack them. Sometimes not knowing who you are. I've always said, particularly since the 80s evolution of Batman, that Bruce Wayne is not the real person. Bruce Wayne is the mask.
Mm-hmm.
The Batman is who he really is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which becomes interesting. And you know, it's a little bit of this dovetails. And remember we talked in week 2 a little bit about duality of man, this sort of thing. It's a very simple thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Night, day, black, white, good, evil. Right? Christ, anti-Christ, Christian, atheist, whatever these diametrically opposed sort of beliefs or conditions are. So let's keep going. Let's find some more.
I don't know if you guys have seen the Game Plan, the best one.
No, I don't know that.
The Rock is in it. He's like a big football star. And then a little girl shows up on his doorstep one day, and it's his daughter. And it's like a whole thing. And then he has
And why? And again, but this is an identity picture. But why is it an identity picture?
because there's a whole different part of his world that he's not even aware of.
He was a man. He's an athlete. He's a football player. He's a professional. He's wealthy. Those things all define him. Now he's a father.
Yeah.
Father's something else.
How about Northern Promises?
You mean Eastern
Or
Promise?
Eastern Promises, yeah.
I was going to say History of Violence, really.
The History of Violence,
That's
too. That was the next one on the top
Yeah.
of my head.
Yeah. Again, now that's a different thing. That is unlike the one trope, the one paradigm we're talking about, which is we discover something we didn't know about ourselves or have to investigate ourselves in History of Violence. It's about burying the self and becoming someone else.
So,
Consciously.
Joker?
Huge. Huge. Okay. I mean, it's by the end of it, does the Joker even know who he is?
Right.
There's some evidence in the comics to suggest he doesn't. He's so repressed. Let's go for some more. How about Freaky Friday? Okay, now Freaky Friday, different concept, though. Not about discovering something. It is forcing someone to swap places and in the doing, learn something about someone else and about themselves. That's a trope that goes back, you know, Mark Twain, The Prince and the Pauper. Hugely successful 19th century novel, mainly for young people. A prince and a pauper trade places, and now the prince can't get back in the castle. And they have to learn about each other. This stuff is super, super powerful to us. It is a springboard from which we can explore all kinds of stuff. One aspect of this, and that we can think about, is I think sometimes if you think about things that you fantasize about, chances are other people are fantasizing about them. And that means there can be relatability, and where there's relatability, we're approaching universality, and we approach universality, we can build a bigger audience, no matter what our film is about. Okay? So, for example, let me think of a good one. That kids will get mad at their parents, maybe, or whoever. And they go, oh, there must have been a mistake at the hospital, this isn't my family. What if they went to the hospital and found out I was really actually secretly a prince? You laugh, but I know a girl, I don't know her, excuse me, there is a girl from Morgantown who discovered she literally is an African princess. And when she goes back to Africa now, like they treat her like this big deal. And she had no idea because her mom had met and had a relationship with a man from Africa. They fell, I don't remember what it was, why they didn't end up together. And then he died. And so she just raised her daughter, you know. But then the daughter starts saying, yeah, but who's my dad? Who's my dad? What's the story? And this one thing led to another. It turns out she was royalty, you know, in, I can't remember if it's Zimbabwe or where it is. But that's crazy, okay? I know someone that's very close to me who discovered that they're, through DNA, their biological father's not their biological father. I know 2 people now. And that person discovered that they are, in fact, royalty. And related to all these presidents and all this, like old American aristocracy. I had no idea. It was a lot, right? It actually helped them get through it. Not that they said, oh, now I know that I'm, you know, king so-and-so. But more, this helps me understand why I am the way I am. You know, looking at our past is helpful. It can be healing when you find out. It's really cool. My grandma always used to talk to me about her grandfather and how much she liked him and how cool he was. But I never met him. You know, he died in 1935. Very, very old then, almost 100 years old. But I met this really old man who knew him. It's about 20 years ago. And we were talking, and he's like, he knew I was in the movie business and everything. He goes, well, it's no wonder you're a storyteller. Because, you know, your great-great-great-grandfather, John Mortimer Orr, told the best ghost stories. He would tell these scary stories. He could just hold audiences. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that.
Right.
You know? That's a cool thing. It makes us kind of go, wow, you know, that's like cool.
It's in your blood.
It's in your blood. What did I tell you guys early on here? Once you started this, you joined a tribe, your identity changed significantly because you are filmmakers. We're not going to say if you're good or bad. Doesn't matter. You're filmmakers. On your way to being professional filmmakers. You're certainly not who you were 8 months ago, 9 months ago by any stretch, right? It's different. Thinking about it. When we start filtering it through identity. And we look at Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it becomes these really interesting conversations about who are you really? And what is good and evil? And, you know, why, you know, how are we unleashing? Who's the real person, Jekyll or Hyde? Because they are the same person, but they're not. And that's a fascinating thing. We look at something like Split or Sybil or one of these films that deals with multiple personalities. I think I might have told you guys this. We had a professor here once, right, who explained why you do a multiple personality thing.
Yeah,
It was
well,
just-
like we're driving around.
Yeah.
I think of that every time I drive.
It's
around.
crazy, right?
Mhm.
But it helps us understand. You know, there's a great horror movie from the 80s called The Stepfather about this guy who just he's a serial killer, but he doesn't want to be. He's trying to have the perfect family, and he goes along, and it seems like everything's great, but if they do one thing that fucks with his vision, with his delusion, then he freaks out. And there's a great moment at one point, because we've seen him do this now twice, and he's on the second one, and he's challenged, and he yells at the girl about something, and he goes, wait a minute, who am I here? He has to stop and think for a second, which personality is he wearing?
Well, that's
Wow.
terrifying.
Oh, it's a really good movie. But look at Psycho. I mean, look at what happens in Psycho.
Just don't want to see that.
Hmm. If I show you Psycho, then I can't show you something else. You know what? We'll watch Psycho get on the road in the Hitchcock unit. Because sometimes we don't get to. We'll do it then.
Okay.
And we'll spend time on it, because there's other things to talk about with Psycho. Because I have two things.
Who's the lead actor on Psycho?
Anthony Perkins,
Okay.
who was man a closeted gay man for a long time, finally was never with a woman until he was in his 30s. They got married and had a family, but died of AIDS. He kept living this double life, and it, you know, and that's an interesting thing. Okay, so parents know that they're doomed.
What do you mean?
They're doomed. They're going to lose everyone. Their whole society is going to go away. And so they take their son, put him in a vessel, and send him off, where he grows up to become this incredible, strong, godlike hero who discovers who he really is and then fights for justice. Who is that?
Superman.
It's Moses, bro.
What?
But it is Superman. Thank you for playing. When you had two young men, sons of recent Jewish immigrants to the United States in the late 1920s, early 1930s. Mom and dad don't speak language. It's so foreign. Living in Cleveland, Ohio, nobody knows you. Nobody sees you. You're actually a second-class citizen by virtue of being an immigrant, and a third-class citizen by virtue of being a Jew. You're not the big athlete. You're not the super popular kid. Your family's poor as fuck. But what you know about yourself is how talented you are, what you can do. And you start projecting that into your creativity. And you think about the stories you were told about the Golem, who rescued Jews in Prague in the 15th century, a monster that a rabbi created who would kill Jewish enemies. You think about Moses, right? Moses, who once he could have been anything, up to and almost including being Pharaoh of Egypt, chose authenticity, chose being Jewish, and rescued his people. Why can't you see me? And those two guys, Siegel and Schuster, created Superman. Years before he even went into the comics, they had created. Kids doodling in high school. That's fascinating, isn't it? On the surface, we think, well, we know what Superman is. Do we? Any more than what Wonder Woman was, which was created by a freak with a fetish. Wonder Woman's all about bondage and domination. It's all very sexualized. My mom got so mad when I explained it to her. Because she's like, that was my favorite character when I was a child. And reading the comic books, and she was all pissed. And I'm like, we had some freaky dude who also invented the polygraph, the lie detector.
Really?
Yeah, he did that, and he created Wonder Woman, but he was always like living with two women and tying them up and beating shit out of each other. Yeah, freaky.
Yeah.
Freaky. But how about, is there drama in denying, in repressing who we are?
Yeah.
Sure, right? I mean, we can easily look at, we can build a million stories out of a character who's gay, who's trying to closet, trying to play straight. It's easy, right? We can go a million miles, a million directions with that. But it doesn't just have to be about that. You know, we can look at, remember Joseph Campbell, the reluctant hero? Remember we talked about Joseph Campbell last semester? Luke Skywalker, the reluctant hero. It is revealed to Luke Skywalker who he really is, He didn't want to deal with it. You know who else didn't? Jesus Christ. Right up to the last minute. Do I got to do this? Father, why have you forsaken me? Even Jesus is like, come on, really? That reluctance, that attempt to escape our destiny is dramatically satisfying. Especially the reluctant thing or the unlikely thing. When we attach labels to people in what's the Incredibles, which is a film I really love. I really love that film. It's beautifully designed and it's just fun. And if you all were my age and you grew up with certain things in the 60s, you would see things in The Incredibles that aren't, readily apparent to you, but that make it such a wonderful viewing experience. But look at the character of Jack Jack. They're even saying, wonder what his power is going to be, but no one thinks about it. And they underestimate Jack Jack. Why?
This is big.
He's a baby. He's hell boy, but he's a baby. Right? Because we project things onto people that, there's a great line, this new film I want to see about the African American fighter pilot. Did you guys see that?
I've seen the trailer.
What's it called?
I
I keep wanting to say devotion, and that's not what it is. But it's one word. But at one point, someone wants to point out to him, and they go, it must be really tough being, he goes, a Navy fighter pilot? Yeah, toughest job there is. And he just first and foremost, I am a pilot. We are all going to take on and discard various roles in our life. Right now, you're a student. Right now, you're a filmmaker. Right now, you're a woman, you're a man, you're a husband, you're a musician, you have different identities that make up who we are. And that's fodder for drama. Even Romeo and Juliet is to some extent an identity picture, because not that it's only about identity, but identity complicates that story. Why? Because these two kids, through no fault of their own, have been painted into a corner by their parents, by this feud. Therefore, you have to be this. Sometimes what can work with identity storytelling is fatalism. I was really upset one time. They had these poor kids from a project in Chicago came to see my film, Kids in a Round Table, and at the end of the film, this little girl pulls a sword out of the stone. She's going to go have an adventure with Merlin. And we talked about it, and this one little girl said to me, she said, so you're saying that we all carry Excalibur around inside of us and that we can be anything we want? And I said, yeah. And she goes, I don't believe you. She goes, no one's ever told me that. My mom never tells me that. So it's interesting, the assaults on identity that can keep us from being who and what we want to be.
For sure.
And where we want to go with what we want to do with our life. Now, I do agree with John Lennon. Life is what happens to you while you're making your plans. Well, if you went to me, 21-year-old Bob, and you saw my checklist of what I wanted out of my life, I actually got it all. And so why am I so stressed and depressed at times and worried? Because we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live at one moment in history. History is moving on. We're in constant growth. There's no stasis. But if there is, if you are stuck in time, chances are you're not doing very good work. And maybe you're happy, maybe it's illusory, maybe you really are happy. Maybe there's some people that are just happy to be stuck. That's something that really defines people, their ability, their willingness, their ability to accept change, to embrace change. It's huge with us. It's a very, very big deal. We can deconstruct this conversation big time. There's one big area we haven't talked about, but we're going to here shortly. But we can sort of take all of this apart too and really strip it down and at almost an atomic level. The journey to being or becoming what it is, how we see ourselves. Being kept from that, being challenged for that, or being led somewhere we didn't know we were going to go. All of those things lead to good drama, right? We see it every day in our life. You know one of the hardest things about being a parent is your kids not being what you thought they were going to be. I've had to work on that. You know, losing, I have my son, but he's like a 2-year-old. You know, 23 years old. He's like he's 2 years old. That wasn't what I envisioned. My daughter does not do things the way I wanted to. And she didn't give a shit if I like it or not. And it was like, oh my God. She's not my plaything. She's not my statue that I sculpted. She's her own person. Fuck. You have to learn to accept that. You know, relationships are funny. You know people, they broke up. Well, he's just really changed. Did he? Did he change? Or did he reveal who he really was? That's something too, right? Who are we? Who am I here? This concept can be explored in so many ways. You know, one of the things I wrote that struck me when I was writing those essays, I did one on Scanners, the David Cronenberg film. 2 guys discover they are brothers, and their dad had subjected them to all this medical testing, and they've both been just dysfunctional and jacked up. But guys with some sort of a superpower, sort of wandering in society. And the one guy's just basically been schizophrenic for 25 years, just never been functional, living on the streets. And now it's sort of like, wait a minute, I'm these things? I'm this person. I'm not who I thought I was. But what I wonder is, then who are they really? Or what happened to the person they would have been had they not been exposed to this stuff? Had my son not developed autism, is he still who he is, or did he become someone else? Maybe these are moot points. This is arguing how many angels dance on the head of a pin. But what I find is, if nothing else, it illustrates to me how powerful this aspect of storytelling is. Who am I here? We've been force-fed it since we were little kids. Cinderella. How can they identify Cinderella? Because for whatever reason, they're so stupid, they can't tell by looking at her. What do they have to do? Does anybody remember?
Cinderella, they bring around the shoe.
Glass slipper.
Right.
Gotta put the glass slipper. How about Beauty and the Beast? What's important about that? But who you really are. Right?
To look past how someone
To look
looks.
past that. But also, in the part of the beast, to accept this is who I am. To learn to accept who we are in spite of not being who we thought we were going to be. You know, if you had told me on the way in the door to this building in 2008 that I was going to be here for like 15 years, I would have turned around and walked out. I would have been scared. I would have been like, no way. I'll just be a teacher. I won't be this, you know, and now it's the exact opposite feeling. I feel like I'm so lucky that my career lets me do this. But imagine if I had given in to my insecurities about, do you know what I mean? Like, I would have made a big mistake, and I would have not developed all these relationships and mentored these people and had the great, you know, when it's successful, it's really fun, it's really cool. I always say this, you know, comic books saved my life, my professional life. When I was just done, Hollywood just left me for dead, and I got a chance to do some comic books, and it literally got me access I'd never had at movie studios. But what a move, I never saw that coming. And it couldn't happen now. Not really, not like that. We just don't live in the same world. But if you had gone to me in 1994 when I was doing my first movie as a director, and someone said, hey Bob, you wanna write a comic book? I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. I'm a movie director. You know, I was so focused on that dream, on that image that I could accept. Even I was down on myself and I would direct huge commercials and would feel bad about myself because it wasn't movies. My definition of self was so narrow and frankly toxic. And that's why I say to students all the time. Because instead of enjoying these other things and realizing they were making me a more powerful, more experienced, and frankly a guy who was creating more intellectual property, therefore worth more,
Right.
I couldn't see past that. If I'm not this, I'm a failure.
It was limiting beliefs. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I could go back and let myself off the hook a bit. I really do. Because I would have done a lot of other things, I think. And I would have enjoyed producing more, but I felt bad about myself if I was producing. Then, you know, I was a second-class citizen. Now I'm producing all the time and I'm loving it. Because it doesn't, but to be fair, my self-image, my desire, my ambition for myself has been, you know, reward. I mean, it's a thing. You know, if I die tomorrow, no one's ever going to say, what did he do? I mean, you know, you can go to a billion books, look in the books, there's my name, you know what I did. Go to IMDb, I'm safe. But even then, I think that evolved with me too, because, you know, we live in this marvelous time where we can create so many different things and express ourselves. So, you know, I feel very, very differently than I did 30 years ago. And by the way, your journey's gonna be your journey. I mean, all I can do is say, hey, you know, for what it's worth, might I recommend, you know, not beating yourself up because of this. Take it, use it, don't let anything go to waste. Take every experience and don't let it go to waste, you know. And anyway, I don't want to get too far down the line. But there's another aspect of this that can go down a few rabbit holes. There's the, you know, this kind of shape-shifting type thing. The werewolf, the vampire, you know, with some sort of mutant. You know, who am I? In that respect, that's interesting. Much like Dr. Jekyll, you know, we're going to find this thing that is inside and release it. And that's not, we think about those stories as like, you know, it's a science fiction type thing. But shape-shifting has been a part of myriad cultures' storytelling, you know, for millennia. It's interesting to us. We just, you know, for some reason or reasons, prominent reasons, you know, that works for us. Hey, you know, to an extent, we talk about identity. How about, you know, the way we will invest objects with meaning? We give them identity. Or can do, right?
That's true.
I mean, we can. That glass slipper, it has, you know, it has a mission, it has a function, it has a power. It has its own identity. It is that missing clue that can bring these concepts together. But then there's another aspect of this, and it's one that George explored, you know, to great success with the Living Dead movies. You know, we're seeing, I remember there was a moment in Dawn of the Dead where there's a nun shuffling along. And we don't know if Fran, the female lead in Dawn of the Dead, we don't know her faith. She could be Jewish, she could be Catholic, she could be Buddhist, we don't know. But there's a moment when she locks eyes with this zombie nun. And the nun is caught, I think, in the door or something, and Fran opens it to let her out. And there's no dialogue. But the exchange between them speaks volumes. Fran knows that this is a flesh-eating creature, but she looks at that nun's habit, and it triggers a cultural response. We do things, you know, it's fascinating the way we do those things. And how about Martin? Martin for identity. And then again, we get that fatalism thing. This is who I am. This is how I must function. You know what I say? Whether Martin is a supernatural,
Hello, I was wondering if Jamal was here.
nope,
Okay. Would I be able to get into the equipment room?
not right now. Not from us. I'm in the middle of a lecture.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Where was I?
You're talking about Martin and his fatalism.
Okay, but you know, Martin's victims are still just as dead, but he has a way of coping with his very destructive, sexualized, violent, you know, creepy ass obsessions and violent acts. But Kuda and others, they have to find another way to organize him to deal with his identity, because they don't quite know where does he fit? What pigeonhole are we going to put him in? Or this isn't going to work. You know, talking about, and how about stereotyping? Right? All kinds of stereotyping. Think about the things we say. There's the obvious crap that, you know, that we can go to obviously with race or gender orientation or whatever. But then there's even more kind of subtle, insidious stuff. Dumb jock. Nerd. Beauty queen, prom queen, cheerleader. Oh, that kid, he was in the band. Right? We label to organize. But then what becomes interesting is we can find drama in undermining, battling, shredding stereotypes. Right? That can be that can be a really cool thing to do. Which is, again, believe it or not, this brings us back around to something like Freaky Friday. Where, oh my God, this is how mom lives. Oh my God, this is how my kid lives. You know, forced into another place. You know, sometimes, and there's a fish out of water component of this, where we force two very different personality types, identities, cultures, whatever, and force them to work together for some reason, or travel together. And then they have to navigate each other's culture. So it's not searching for your identity per se as a through line, but learning and growing as a person because of your exposure to another identity can be very dramatically fulfilling. Listen, almost every shitty Hallmark Christmas movie is an identity movie or has an identity component, not because we don't know who somebody really is, but why? What usually happens to the women in those movies?
Like at the beginning or towards the end?
Towards the end.
They usually end up with the guy, and their Christmas is the best Christmas ever.
But what do they have to do in order to get the guy?
They have to go through some challenges sometimes.
They have to step outside the limitations that they encase themselves in, and maybe others have as well. You know, sometimes there's a widow with a young son, and she just doesn't want to get involved again because she's been hurt. You know, so her identity is partially she's unobtainable or afraid, because we got to have a transformation. So I said there was one I was kind of holding to the side. Then there's the identity thing. We're going to watch the ultimate identity movie today in the form of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But a lot of this, much like with Frankenstein and Dracula and the other stuff we've looked at, goes back to pure, primal, existential fear. What happens after I die? Is my soul a thing? Is my consciousness a thing? And if aliens take me, and I'm gone, and they've taken my body or they've replicated me, what happened to me? Where do I exist?
So you're taking us down that rabbit hole today.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I just live to serve.
Yeah.
You know. This is, the way I want you to think about this is, if you are waiting for me to drop some mic drop and go, there you go. That's not going to happen, per se. What really is happening here is we're shining a light on it, and you guys need to pick this football up and run with it. Who am I? And examine how, whatever that limitation is that we put on a character, how is that going to inform the dramatic? Which is really, really cool. It opens up so many doors. Yeah, it's, well, duh. Bless you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because at its heart, belief is a huge, huge part of this. You know, I don't know how much sports you guys watch, but one of the things that has fascinated me my whole life is every once in a while you'll see a team that just does not have the talent that another team has. Maybe by a small margin, maybe by a larger margin. But you'll see this moment when you realize these people just decided they can't lose. And they will win a game they should have lost because psychologically they just decided they were going to win. And often, just as they were, maybe more importantly, the other team's like, we can't beat these guys. We can't do it, not today. Right? There's no belief is powerful. When people tell us to, you know, now how we choose to tap into belief or how we choose to either embrace or run, as I said, you know, we talked about the reluctant hero thing, you know, that is going to have dramatic ramifications as well. Okay? So Moses, what the fuck? And you know, by the way, Superman had a cloth in his thing, just like Moses did. Go for it. I just gotta tell Kevin Beer something.